All right, we are back on live with another exciting interview. We have two awesome people, which are going to be interviewed by Kaylee, who is the media manager here at the Global Hack. And we have with us John Robb. You are a musician, writer, activist, and author of 9 books on pop culture, and founder of the Louder Than War website. And you, Caroline, you are the Secretary General of Care International. So amazing people. Welcome, everyone.
There's another link. We're actually brother and sister as well, which
Brothers and sisters. It's pretty cool. But you're based at different places. You're Caroline, you're in Geneva, and you, John, are in Manchester. And you are both on the track creativity, right?
yeah, in different kind of ways. Yeah, I mean, I'm all about creativity because well, from writing. But I mean, obviously that branches out to lots of other things because all great creativity is based in the world that it's actually existing in. So you can react very quickly to the world. And always my little argument is always about music as the glue that joins everything together. So it's we know lots of different people and you can join them together by your music and by the way you kind of live. Caroline's more based in, well, it's such a complex job, but you do a lot of things, don't you, Caroline?
Sure. So at the moment, I'm a chief advisor to the Africa Centre for Economic Transformation, and I'm focusing on working with African leaders and global leaders to look at how we can, transform countries across the world, including the African continent. And before that, I worked for the World Bank and the IMF.
And you worked with Kofi Annan for years as well, didn't you?
I did. I worked for many years for Kofi Annan at the Africa Progress Panel. And, it'd be great if we can talk about leadership in this small segment we have, because, he was a leader, and I think that's the kind of leader we need more of these days. So it'd be good if we had an opportunity to discuss that.
Cool. So Kaylee, just take it away and start the interview. And yeah, excited to listen.
Okay, yeah. Right.
All right. So,
Yeah.
hi everyone. So, in this segment, we will be talking about the arts and creativity, and I really want to focus a little bit on the music industry and where we are heading with this. But as said, not only that, we're also asking what impact does art might have on activism, and we will also talk more about empowerment in general. I want to remind everyone who are watching. Don't forget to post questions along the way, as we really want to give answers to the ideas and questions you might have at home. But coming back to the topics, as said already, we couldn't ask a better spokesperson on this chat, as longtime musician, journalist, and really a man who's published 9 books on pop culture. Hello, John Robb from me
Oh,
too,
yeah.
and and joining your amazingly talented sister, Caroline Kende-Robb. Hello, Caroline. So
I'm very happy to be here.
how are you guys doing?
We're doing okay. I mean, I guess because we've got half an hour, I won't mind just jumping straight into this. And I mean, what I would like to go on first is this idea that maybe it's been bounced around music for years. This idea of balancing out the male and the female, an argument in punk rock, and it's kind of an argument returned to a lot. But I want to apply it in terms of world leadership and the things. And this is something me and Caroline feel very strongly about. That the virus thing is what's concentrating everyone's minds now, obviously. And one thing that we've been noticing in the last few days is the male leader. This is a generalization, of course, but the male leadership has been pretty poor. The Trump school is going to be over. The old school male war leader thing, that's over for me. I'm interested in the empathetic female style leadership, and maybe that's one thing that'll come out of the virus. But I think Caroline's much better placed to talk about this than I am.
Yeah, thanks, John. Let me just jump in here as well. And I think I'm doing a lot of work on the COVID-19 and the response. And there's 2 things that we really need to be very aware of. One, we have a response, and then we have consequences of the response, as well as consequences of the virus itself. And this is a global problem, and it requires a global response. And at the moment, we don't really see a global response to this global problem. So that's the first thing. I think we need greater voice from people around the world to demand a global response, because we will not succeed until we succeeded in every single country, which brings me to the point that John was raising. And that's the issue of what is global leadership, and who is able to bring the globe together at this moment in time. And to me, this requires a very different type of leader, the leader who has empathy, the leader who brings in a collective approach. And in some countries, we're just not seeing that. We're seeing the opposite. We're seeing a retraction into people, into your own country. And this will not help us overcome this pandemic and pandemics to come. And therefore, I've got an appeal really to all your listeners to somehow demand that we require a different kind of leadership at the national level, at the global level, but all the way down. I mean, who is running our companies? Who's running our organizations? And why is it that these swaggering men are still succeeding in a lot of spaces, even today? And when we can see there's a lot of successful women in leadership positions, but it's still the male leadership is still the dominant model.
I mean, this is what's interesting about Global Hack, because it's a lot of very young people, the youth, the people just slightly older than the Greta Thunberg generation, and these are the game changers. And I'm an old person. Well, in pop culture terms, I'm an old person now. I'm 58. I think it's the only thing that makes me feel good about the world now is the under 25s. It's a very different generation with different kind of mindset. And that why I like to call the Greta generation, and it really annoys people my age, the males my age, because not only do they recoil from a female, any kind of female leadership. There's nothing worse than a 17-year-old who's smarter than they are and telling them there's problems in the world. And I know those kind of problems that Greta Thunberg talk about in the middle of this pandemic will seem almost irrelevant now, but they're what she was talking about was part of what caused this problem in the first place. And the lack of leadership that we're seeing from the major countries is also part of that problem as well. So when you look at the way the world is these days, you've got the Greta generation on one side and the Trump generation on the other side. And the Trump generation, those days are over. When these leaders like Bolsonaro, even Johnson in the UK, look on Trump as their hero of how to run things. They talk about the war hero, the big thrusting male, the warrior. A virus doesn't care about a warrior or a war hero. It doesn't know who Winston Churchill is. It's about the people. And what was brilliant in New Zealand when she said 1 death in New Zealand is 1 death too many. She was talking about the people, not about herself or her own personal career. And we were talking about creativity before, to link it back into creativity. As a musician, as somebody who's been involved in creativity for years, that empathetic thing is something that's important in our world. There's all great art comes out of a sensitivity and an empathy. Any art that doesn't embrace that is art that's totally uninteresting. So that's the only role that we can play in this kind of thing as well, that we can see these problems. These people like Trump are our enemies as well. So that's how I would tie all these disparate little strands together.
Can we talk about a little bit about the music in general as well, like if to jump up to another topic now, because I think one of the sector that really got a major hit from this crisis is entertainment in general. Like concerts, public performances were the first one canceled when the virus started spreading, and there are thousands of amazing artists unemployed and home for weeks. And I won't even start with the festivals that are already canceled, live shows, etc. Can we say that the entertainment and music industry is also in shock? Talking about this matter, that's really close to you, John.
It's in shock, but it's always been creative people, and creative people find creative answers to problems. I think in the context of being compared to a frontline worker in the UK, like being a nurse working in the NHS, where they have to make their own PPE out of shower curtains because the government's not provided any safety equipment. The problems that we have getting gigs is pretty low down on the list of the problems that are going on in cultural society at the moment. So what we've all had to do is retreat into our bedrooms, and the people doing those live cast gigs, they're not always that great to watch musically. But our job now as the clowns of the world, or the entertainers, is to entertain people and to make content. I'm not a person who loves escapism in music, but I think maybe this time that's our job, is to create some kind of escapism from the relentless stress and dark times that people are in. And Also, there's people I was mentoring on this thing yesterday, and they had a really great schemes. Two of them doing the same scheme, where they're providing content that could be beamed into hospitals for nurses to watch on their downtime or whatever, and I thought that was a cool little scheme. I think we've just been moved into our bedrooms, onto our laptops, working digitally. So as a journalist now, I'm doing all my interviews like this, looking at people's heads, leaning back like that, looking at their chins, recording interviews. It's actually easier for me. I don't have to go anywhere. I can sit here and just interview one person after another. I miss the three-dimensional human contact, and I miss playing gigs. But I think gigs and festivals, till the vaccine turns up, I don't think we're going to have any semblance of gigs and festivals for a couple of years. We have to recalibrate. We have to be smart. It doesn't stop us creating. I'm working on 10 different musical projects at the moment, where people send me bits of music and I mix them and change them and add other bits, guitars, basses, keyboards on them, send them back. We're writing music in completely different ways, but we're still writing music and we're still creating. I mean, like, I'm creating music, and I'm thinking of solutions for a post-coronavirus world. And in a sense, it's very similar, because I don't want to be talking about music all the time here. I think it's similar to what Caroline's doing as well. I mean, Caroline is working in a more political, social, economic sphere, but using a creativity as well to find solutions to those problems. Would you say that's true, Caroline?
Yeah, but what do you
That's
think,
true.
Caroline? Like, how big of a role music actually plays in connecting people in such hard times?
So I think I'm going to exactly. You're absolutely a very, very important part. And I think the broader aspect of the question, which John was picking up on, is about the creativity. And certainly in the space I'm working in, everybody is having to be extremely creative, because this has come out of no. And we have been living in a world that's been, globalized, whether you like it or not. But the solutions that people are looking at initially were not global. Everybody was retracting into their own nation state, and that is not. The second point I want to make is linked to what John said about the frontline workers on this pandemic, and how heroic they are. 70% of the frontline workers are women, and
Exactly. That's what I was.
don't
I
even
wanted to ask next. Exactly that. A lot of the women are like not only frontline workers, but the cashiers, that the nurses, everyone. What's your take on that problem? You can follow.
Yeah, I mean, this is something that we're beginning to actually acknowledge. So at the beginning wasn't well acknowledged, and now it is acknowledged. They're the frontline workers, but in many countries, they're the people who are managing the households, plus they're managing the communities. And earlier on, we were talking about the pandemic hitting Africa and how serious this will be. And there you've got roles of women who are also community. They manage the communities as well as their households, as well as the managing the farms, etc., etc. A lot of multiple roles for women. And yet much of the time, these roles are not acknowledged, and they will be the ones who are impacted the most by the coronavirus. And it's important that that is acknowledged. And when we have these responses to the virus, that when they get, helicoptered in, that they shouldn't undermine the community structures that are actually helping communities cope in these very, very difficult.
That's a cool sound, but not sure if it's
Who's
yeah,
doing this?
it's been scratch Perry's in the house. But that's a good point about what Caroline's saying about the global thing, and everyone's thinking internally now. And I could probably tie that back into music, because music's always thought internationally. All the best music has, not in a sense that the biggest bands in the world should be like a McDonald's, stretching out across the world, playing stadiums everywhere. But the idea I like of the globalization of music is I can hear music from all over the world. So I can hear that fantastic band like Coco from Congo, and I think they're amazing bands. And and I could connect to what they're doing, and their music's a mixture of all our music and their music, and in that way, we're already dealing with a very global kind of mindset. And maybe that's something that we can maintain as musicians that would help infuse the thinking of people. That yeah, yes, we have to close down our communities to make sure people don't get infected, but we still have to be looking outwards. So with technology, like the technology we're using now, this is very global. We got 3 people in complete different countries speaking to each other. So we're joined together. We're closer now than we've ever been before. And I was reading a really interesting article about the pandemic that happened 20 years ago, 25 years ago, like it could have done because it could have happened at any time. That we would have been sat there on phones ringing each other up. It would have been pre-internet time. This is quite amazing. The technology is just about holding together a global, international kind of idea that we're still in touch with each other. And music is part of that process as well. So music has always been very tied in with technology. And generally, music also has a very forward-thinking attitude as well. Most musicians are idealistic people, not all, but most are. And I think we need a big, healthy dose of idealism in a post-virus world to try and make something better of the world than it was before. Because for the last 20 years, as most musicians who were clued up to what the world was like, you could tell that things were not going very well. You know, the rampant pollution, the rampant capitalism destroying everything, and just the way we treated the environment and treated animals. You know, I mean, I don't want to get all on a high horse about it, but every reason I ever became a vegan has become is paramount to what the problems we're facing now. You know.
Yeah, and I just want to agree with John on that, on this point about what does a post coronavirus world look like. And seriously, I really hope it's an opportunity for, I mean, young people to a majority of people my age, because I'm just a little bit younger than John. But we do need young people to definitely question, is this the world we want? And this is an opportunity to change the values we have, the systems that have been created by my generation. And you know, the first and foremost is, do we have the right leaders? Is this the leadership style we want? And then secondly, how can we accept such gross inequality that exist in the United States, that exist in Europe, exist in the United Kingdom, that exist in Africa? And how can we live in a world where there are these really big gross inequalities, which are being really, really emphasized under this pandemic? Because this pandemic, although it attacks everybody, it affects poor and excluded people the most, because they often live in crowded housing. They often have very poor access to healthcare, and they are the ones who don't have a voice and are not being asked what they can do as part of the response. And in Ebola, the Ebola virus, we learned that the communities must be involved, and women must be involved, and they know how to manage their communities. So it's about really thinking, getting a response right globally, but thinking locally, because a lot of the response will have to be managed and implemented locally, whether you're in the UK, United States, the Gambia or Kenya. The local level response is absolutely essential, and it's the women who are often managing that local level response.
It's interesting, just tie the 2 strands back in with music again, because Caroline has always worked quite closely with Bob Geldof as well. Bob Geldof said that Caroline is the only woman who ever tells me shut up and he listens. But I was thinking maybe one of the roles that we provide in music and music culture was people like us ask the questions, and poor Caroline, the people, well, their people have to provide the answers.
And I think actually, John, I think this is really, really important point you've made, because I think people have to ask the questions, and it's got to be everybody. I know you have a lot of young people who listen to these incredible hackathons that you're doing, and we need the voice of young people to really start asking the questions. That is essential. No voice is one voice is really important, right? There's no small number. Every single voice matters, and the questions have to be asked. And we have an opportunity now, because the whole world is like, what are we doing? We're all in a state of, whoa, what's happened here? And I think it's creating a gap, right? It's creating a gap to question, but the gap won't last long. And I think everybody has a role to now have that voice come forward and question the leadership. Question is my local community being asked about what response they can do, and connect it back up to the national response, which then connects globally. And I think musicians do that very well. But I think everybody has a role to play in doing that.
Completely. Yeah. I mean, this is what we've seen in the last few weeks is, whereas before there was a really heavy and irritating celebrity culture where really famous people's voices was somehow amplified louder than everyone else's. But now what people have finally realised is that the nurses on the front line, they're the genuine heroes. You know, the heroes are not, they're not film stars or pop stars or TV celebrities who've been completely caught flat-footed by this. They're all sitting there complaining about how bored they are in their mansions. You think you're lucky you can actually sit in a mansion. Even the Daily Mail, a very rank paper in the UK, hideous paper, as you read it, and I read everything. I read the left and the right because I want to know everything, just like our dad did, actually, Caroline.
Yeah.
and and even they're turning against the government, and they're turning against this idea of the oppressive right-wing celebrity culture, in a sense, that the nurses are the heroes, and the driving the trucks and the people working in the shops loading the shelves, their voices are as important. And I think, are people are we going to remember this when if and when we ever get out of this, or is it just going to be after 9/11 within 1 week it all just went to big rush back to the bottom again? I mean, my hope is, and I'm a very cynical person, but I like to keep an idealistic streak somehow, is that this could be the end period of the strutting Trumps, with their big ties and their macho, self-centered point of view. And maybe, like Caroline's saying, this is the time of the communities, and people's voices get heard more, and people get to organise their own lives in a more empathetic way as well, not just about their own community. It's what is it? Work internationally but think locally. I can't remember what the little phrase is, but we're all small communities, but we're all part of a massive community, and that's how we have to think now. And the women, like we said at the beginning, are the ones who seem to cotton onto this. Most of them, not all of them, of course. And the male leaders are just walking around talking about taking images from the Second World War, as and that's not going to fix anything, let alone a virus.
But how to like sum up the conversation? It's been really interesting and nice, but we have another ones already waiting. But you've been following. How's the hack been so far? Are there any fundamentally industry-changing ideas you might have heard or you put an eye on already?
I thought the music one was great yesterday, with Stefan and Ingrid on it, but it would be they're really good thinkers and really good talkers. Most of that hack for me is I've just been involved in my little group, so I need to get back onto that. And I thought it was great. It's international, which is great. It was amazing speaking to somebody in Madagascar who's doing a music project. That was really fascinating. And I was just trying to help people out and connect people up to other people, which is kind of something I've done all my life anyway, And I think it's an amazing idea, and I think, and it's great that it comes from Estonia, which is probably one of the most forward-thinking countries I've been to in Europe, and also the home of Tallinn Music Week, which is an amazing event, music showcase event, which you probably know about. But it's the best one in Europe, and it's one. There's two types of models of music showcase event. There's ones that are industry events. That's fair enough. It is an industry, but there's ones that try and do social change and put music in a context of the world. And what Helen Silner is doing at Tallinn Music Week is the #1 for that. And a lot of people have taken inspiration from Tallinn Music Week, like Ment in Ljubljana and several other upcoming showcase events, which to me is a true future of music and music culture, where it's in a context. It's not just about being successful and selling loads of records. It's about doing something culturally important. It's about doing something that's communally important, and it's not about my career. It's about the career of everybody who's involved in it and the society that you come from as well. I think Tallinn Music Week is a prime mover in that.
I think that's a really good idea or like a thought to end this nice conversation with. Focus more on the local. Think what are and who are our leaders. As youngers, we also have to raise our voice, ask questions, and to more think of the community-wise. I think that's really nice thought to end this up. Thank you so much, John and Caroline. It was really nice talking with you. Could continue on this for another hour, but we're gonna we have to meet Ian and Carmen now and talk about fashion a little bit as more. So stay healthy, stay home, and I hope we'll all be out of this situation as soon as possible.
Oh yeah, yeah.
So much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
And back to the
Bye.
studio.
Take care. Bye bye.